Welcome to Creatively Using the Creative Suite. Here's your host, Bernskiold. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Creatively Using the Creative Suite podcast. My name is Bernskiold, and this week we're going to continue the series from a couple of weeks ago when I showed you how to make this restaurant menu application in Photoshop. We did the base layout in Photoshop. We're going to take it this week into Flash Catalyst, and I'm going to show you how you can turn this into a full interactive Flash website. Right, so let's jump in here, and the first thing we get when we launch Flash Catalyst is this main window. And what I want to do today is I want to create a new project from my design file. In this case, I want to create it from an Adobe Photoshop PSD file. So I'm going to click that, and I can select in my Finder which file to import. In this case, I have my restaurant-menu.psd file from the last episode. I'm going to click Open here. And it's going to import, it's going to give me some import options. I can choose to keep image layers editable or flatten them. I can keep shape layers cropped or flattened. And I can do text layers editable, vector outlines, etc. So I'm going to keep everything editable. I'm going to keep it to its default settings, okay? So, and I'm also going to import non-visible layers here because there might have been layers that I turned off in the Photoshop file just for presentation's sake, but I want them showing now and I want to have them in my Flash Catalyst file. And it's automatically going to pull the size, width, and height of the main area and main canvas of the Photoshop document. So let's not worry about this here, and let's click OK. It's going to go ahead and analyze the Photoshop file and bring it in, read it, get the layers, get the images, get all of the contents from this Photoshop file, and take it into Flash Catalyst. And when it does, it'll look like this. Flash Catalyst is in itself quite a big application in that it takes up a whole lot of real estate on your screen. So mainly, if you haven't worked with Flash Catalyst before, you have a top area similar to most other Creative Suite applications. You've got some tools here. You've got your workflow settings here, and you've got a search field. Then you have different panels. The right hand side looks just like in Photoshop, even though you have some tools up here instead of on the left hand side. You still have some normal panels below, and if you're a Flash user, you'll recognize the bottom part, the timeline, which is now at the bottom here, and we'll also have a couple of states at the top, but we'll go through all of this. What we have in any case in the middle here is our restaurant menu PSD file, and it contains just what we designed. So just to recap here, what we did was create a logo here, and we want this logo clickable to go back to the home page. We created a content area with an image here, sample image for our hearty mains, and we've got some buttons here on the right hand side to choose from as the menu for appetizers, mains, desserts, specials, etc. So now I want to animate this. I want to make it so that it's not going to be as bland and boring as a normal HTML page. So to start with, I'm going to double click where it says page 1 here in the pages and states. I'm going to type in home because this is going to be my home state. Next, I want to select each and every button here, and we're going to convert that into a Flash Catalyst button. So it's going to recognize that it's a button we're dealing with. So to do that without interfering with all other backgrounds, I'm going to lock the background layer. There's a lock field here in the empty column, just like in Photoshop. So I'm going to lock background, content area, and logo, which leaves me just to be able to select each and every button in itself. I'm going to start by selecting all layers that make up the appetizers button. And this little window pops up here in Flash Catalyst asking me, I've selected 3 items, what do I want to do? Do I want to optimize the artwork or convert it to a component? And a component can be a bunch of different things here. You have lists, checkboxes, inputs. And what we want, we have a button. So I'm going to choose here to convert it to a button. And now is the time you can change if this is going to have an up, over, down, disabled appearance. So for example, an over appearance would be changing the state here. Let's say the background color of this. It's a shape, so it's still editable. So I can go into my properties here, and I'll be able to, say, drop the opacity maybe when we hover over this. Let's just do that for the sake here of hover effect. And what you can have down at the bottom, you have a timeline. So by default, it's going to be this snappy fade effect. But what you can do is drag out this little slider here, and we are going to fade this in sort of a duration. So let's fade it in 0.1 seconds each time you do the hover state. Let's double click anywhere here to get back. We've created our first button here, and we're going to do the same to all of the others. Just select them, choose component, button. In this case, I'm not going to do the appearances, so I'm just going to go ahead and just convert this into a button. Not going to worry about doing hover appearances to this. Okay, so we have all of these as buttons now, and we can continue making the rest of our states. So this image that we have is most appropriate for the hearty main section, and I thought we'd start with that. But before we do, I want to note that we don't want this main content area on the home page, so how about just flicking it off? And this is going to work in Flash Catalyst, just like in Photoshop. If you're working with layer comps, you'll be able to turn off layers or layer groups, and they won't be showing when you're using this state. Okay, so this is how our homepage is going to look right now. Maybe we'll add an image here if we're doing this for real. Maybe some text about the restaurant. Something perhaps. But now to create the next state, all I'm going to do is click with the home state selected. I'm going to click duplicate state up here. And I'm going to get a second one. And I'm going to call this mains. Okay. So now I have home and I have mains. So if I select mains and make sure it's blue here in the background, I'm going to turn on content area again. And I'm going to select each and all of these buttons, except the mains. So I'm going to hold down my shift key to be able to select more than one. And I now have 3 different buttons selected. I'm just going to hold down my shift key to keep the constraints to the X and Y axis. And I'm just going to move these in a bit. You'll still be able to see just a little bit here of the text, but otherwise they'll have moved off screen a little bit. So now we're also showing that we're focusing on our mains. So you can add some quick text in here in Flash Catalyst. We can use the text tool and just drag out a box. I'm just going to type simply lorem ipsum dollar sit met, and I'm just going to copy in because I don't want to do this for real today. Let's do this. Okay, so when we're done with this, let's just expand the text area so it shows everything in here. Oops, where did it go? Somewhere in here now we have lost the text we put in. Let's see here. Where did our text go? I see it. I see it here. It's being set here to fade out for some reason, as it goes from mains to home, which is correct, of course. Okay, let's see. Text is somewhere. Text is gone. But as you can see, it's really simple to create this text layer, even though it might sometimes hide from you. Here it is. For some reason, it's moving away from me. Actually, I think it's because it's being created in one of these layer groups. For example, one of the buttons. Maybe that contains a text layer. Flash Catalyst works, there we go, just like Photoshop. So if you create a layer like the text here and put it inside something that's below the content box, it won't be all that funny afterwards. So now that we have our text layer visible, I'm going to position this out, just scale it to the way we want it here, and let's quickly select the text and grab and make this, turn it into another color here. Now the color picture is very easy to use, and I think here we have a text we can use for this. Okay, so we've got our text on the page, and let's do some animation here. So we're going from home to the mains view and want to do that in a nice and easy way. So home, we have two state transitions here at the bottom. We have home to mains. So what happens when we go from home to mains? Now, if we do it right now, and I can play the transition here, it's just gonna bam appear. I can manually in Flash Catalyst drag these sliders next to each of these layers. So we see the hidden layers are faded out. And what we can do is drag out this duration. If I play it now, the text is going to fade in, and I can do the same to the content area. I can do it, making sure the start point is still at 0, and I can fade it in here. And it's going to fade in together. I can move the start point here so the text starts fading in afterwards. And I can have the buttons move, say, at another point in time. I can have them move different speeds here, so they'll move both in different speeds and at different times. But I can also, if I don't want to worry about my transitions here, I can just hit smooth transition at the bottom, which will make for all of these a smooth default transition here of, say, 0.5 seconds. And I can also choose to overwrite existing effects to just make it that default transition. Now, I want to make sure I have this when I go from mains back to home, that I also want something. So clicking on the mains to home in the state transitions, we have fade out, we have move, it's going to automatically sense what it needs to be doing. And I can just hit smooth transition here as well. So I think we're beginning to get done here. So if I click Command and Enter on the Mac, Control Enter on the PC, it's going to start running this. It's going to build it out as restaurant menu. It's going to build it out as a website using Flash. Now, while it's rendering this and bringing it up for us, I want to point out that this was done without any Flash use. We didn't open up Flash as an application, and we didn't have to do a single bit of code. All we did was use the Flash Catalyst application from a Photoshop file with layers, selecting I want this transition here, that to transition there, and how long. And the result here comes up in Safari. And I'm just going to let it load here. When it does come up, you'll see that it is actually a nicely designed Flash file. Now, as a web designer, I need to point out that maybe this application is not the best use for Flash. You might be able to do the same functionality in other ways, but it's really cool to be able to create Flash applications simply. So here's what we have. We have, when I hover over our starry appetizers, you see the fade hover out effect. There's nothing on the mains, but if I click on mains, oops, we forgot something. There's just one thing to do. We did create our transitions between the two states, but what we didn't do was select that our hearty mains button here, we need to define an interaction here. So over on the right hand side, we have interactions, and I'm going to click add interaction, and on click, it's going to play transition to state, and it's going to go to mains. And when it is in mains, or when it is in home, let's do when it's in any state, it's going to play that transition. Click OK. And now if I do the same build here like I did before, this is now connected. Safari is going to come up eventually with the final build file. So if I now click on mains, it's going to be button, and look what happened there. Now we don't have a home button, so I'm just going to refresh this again to be able to show you how it looks like the full animation. So it only has to have a second, maybe we want some more. So if I click, it's just going to simply fade those to the right and fade everything in. So, this is really simple. We've done it very easily without really spending too much time in code, really spending too much time doing anything. So as you can see, creating these interactive applications in Flash is no longer that hassle that it used to be. You don't need to learn a lot of Flash before you can do and pull off a very good looking Flash website. So thank you all for tuning into this week's episode of the Creatively Using the Creative Suite podcast. My name is Eric Bernskiold. Thank you for watching this week's episode, and I'll hopefully see you back next week with something maybe completely different. Bye bye for now.